right, so the Who's Lucy edition is going to be brought to you by J&J Toy Giants. This is some of the figures that I recently got off of Whatnot. So the first three that I'm going to be showing you, amongst one other one that's separate from this particular toy line, Captain Planet himself, and also one of the Planeteers, Kwame, and also one of the very villainous people that tried to pollute the world, Duke Nukem. And this is actually from the Tiger toys. Now, Tiger, you probably remember, for those of you that are old enough to remember Tiger, made one of the most affordable handheld games. I mean, pretty much any license that Tiger could get their hands on made a handheld, video game. If you didn't have a Game Boy, you didn't have a Game Gear, you probably had a Tiger Electronics game. I know I had a Batman Returns that I played whenever I was on a bus or something like that. But this is actually one of the very few figures that were actually made through Tiger, because they were an electronics company, not an actual toy manufacturer. And also going to be going over Rambo from the Rambo Forces of Freedom cartoon series that was actually based off of the movie franchise First Blood, but then became the Rambo franchise. And I think, if I can remember correctly, there was 5 of them. There was First Blood Part 2, or Rambo First Blood Part 2, then Rambo 3, then John Rambo, or no, it was just Rambo, and then Rambo Final Blood, if I remember correctly. But this was one of the figures that I wish I had back in the day, and just never got around to. It was pretty much like G.I. Joe type figure. It's a little bit smaller than the 3 1/4 inch G.I. Joes, and I'll go over in depth of what company made these figures and how this came about. But let's get to the toy review for Who's Lucy. All right, so one of the very first figures that I just talked about that we're going to start off the video with is going to be none other than John Rambo, part of the Rambo, the Forces of Freedom cartoon series, which is actually based off of the movie franchise First Blood, which then became known as the Rambo series. And Rambo, played by Sylvester Stallone, pretty much made this into a franchise pretty quickly when the second one came out, 1982, and then that was First Blood. And then the one that actually put it on the map as an actual action franchise, Rambo First Blood Part 2, was the one that came out in 1985. And then soon thereafter, the cartoon series that you're basically looking at this figure from, the Rambo, the Forces of Freedom. So back in the 80s, it was really kind of weird as to why they would, a toy company would make a toy, let alone a cartoon series, based on a figure such as Rambo. Now, I don't want to spoil it for anyone. For those who've never watched First Blood or Rambo or any of the Rambo movies for that matter, well, Rambo was a Vietnam vet, and we all know from history, if you paid attention in school, that a lot of the vets in the Vietnam actually went through some stuff. And specifically, he was one of the vets that did everything, like, guerrilla warfare, hand-to-hand combat. And it was really like the guy you would send in to do the jobs that nobody could do, and he would be able to stay alive to do them, and come back alive. And so when he came back to America in First Blood, and of course the Vietnam people, or the vets that came back from Vietnam, were looked down upon because a lot of people were against the war back in the 60s. So, fast forward to the 80s, this was supposed to be taken in 1982. He goes to a town, and the police give him a hard time because they don't want like a loner in their town. They want to keep it clean from outsiders, and so they push him too far, and therefore was setting off his kind of like PTSD, and he goes off on the entire town, specifically on the police force. Brian Dennehy played the captain of the police force that really tried to stick it to John Rambo, and just mollywopped the entire police force, just to protect himself, because he thought he was back in the war. And unfortunately, in real life, that actually happened. A lot of Vietnam vets, because they were under siege pretty much all the entire time that they were there, came back really messed up, and we a lot of times weren't as understanding and sympathetic to the vets that came back from Vietnam. And it was the same thing with any war. World War II, there's a lot of vets that had some stuff. Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, during Desert Storm. There's a lot of people that came back from Desert Storm that were just kind of like, they seen some stuff, and when you try to get back into civilian life, it's very, very hard to do that. And I'm very, very sympathetic myself, not just because I like the movie, but I've seen it firsthand. But so that's basically the story of what this figure is supposed to represent. Now, the manufacturer that made this toy was Coleco. Now, for those of you that were big in the 80s or grew up in the 80s, Coleco was basically a video game company. Like, they made the ColecoVision video game system that was trying to compete with Nintendo and Atari and Sega. So it was kind of odd that they actually would take it. It was much more like the Tiger toys that I mentioned with the Captain Planet that I'm going to go over in a few minutes. But it's really odd that they would take the job on to produce a toy line, and they made a cartoon to kind of sell the toys. So that's basically what they used to do in the 80s. You take a movie franchise or anything that was like action-packed or anything through a movie, you make a toy, and then they would do a cartoon to kind of produce the toys, or basically sell the toys. They did that with Transformers. They did that with let me see what else. They did that with Batman. They did that with Superman. And so Kenner basically made the comics version of the superheroes from DC, so therefore they would make the Super Friends to kind of sell the toys. And so that's basically the idea of what people used to do, or toy companies used to do back in the 80s. And to some extent they still do that today, but they usually, whenever a movie comes out, like for instance Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Mutant Mayhem, at the time of this recording, Mutant Mayhem is about to come out in about another month or so, and they've already been selling the toys like right off the bat before the movies even come out. So like people already have the merchandise before the movie ever hits the stand. Batman '89 was a big example of that. Like, you could not go anywhere in the United States, or anywhere in the world rather, in 1989 and not see the Batman logo anywhere. So this actually is a little bit smaller than a G.I. Joe, because people think it's a G.I. Joe type figure. But if you look, this is one of the re-releases of the G.I. Joe. This is Roadblock, and as you can see, even with the stand, it's a little smaller than the G.I. Joe back in the 80s. So you could have played with your G.I. Joes with this as well, but it wasn't that tall, so. And I don't believe a lot of people, like kids myself, when I was in the 80s, I was a young boy in the 80s, that would use stands that usually you would play with this. And this actually is very, very loose. It's been played with. You can tell. I mean, it's in good condition for how loose it is. It can barely stand on its own. I'm probably going to need to get a stand for it to stand up. I mean, you can probably do it like this, but it looks a little weird. But I mean, the legs and the limbs are very loose. You can see the pins that they used to use in the shoulders and in the arms. They're a little different than they do today. They're not as noticeable as using the G.I. Joes as an example. These are pinless, but you can see the little articulation on the shoulders and stuff like that. But yeah, so that is one of the. I saw this. I got it on Whatnot. I got it from my main man Mecca Market. I'm gonna throw my main man Mecca Market's socials here on the video, and then of course in the description you'll be able to see that. Check him out on Whatnot. I mean, the guy's got some stuff. Like if you just go to one live video that he does for Whatnot, you would not believe the stuff he has, loose or carded. I mean, the other day when I saw this and the Captain Planet figures, he also had a Michael Knight that was from, I believe, Kenner, that was part of the 2-pack of the Industries 2000, so you can get Kit and Michael Knight at the same time. And he had just that Michael Knight in perfect condition, just chilling, and like a slew of different figures. And I saw this too, so like I had to have it. I had to forego the Michael Knight, but I'm hopefully nobody's picked them up, at the time of this recording, by the time I go to another live stream for whatnot. But I'm definitely happy that I got this guy, and he's going to be going in my miscellaneous shelf, as well as the next figures that I'm going to be going over today.
Let our powers combine.
All right, so the final figures that I'm going to be reviewing in this edition of Who's Lucy is none other than the Captain Planet action figure, along with one of the Planeteers, Kwame, and one of the villains, Duke Nukem. And this is actually another kind of head-scratcher toy company that made these figures, which was Tiger Electronics. And as I said in the introduction, if you were someone in the 80s and the 90s, preferably the 90s, if you didn't have a Game Boy and if you didn't have a Game Gear, you definitely had a Tiger Electronics video game, because they made so many different, Full House, they made Barbie, they made Batman, they made Street Fighter, they made Mortal Kombat, like every single license, including Captain Planet. I'm sure they had a Captain Planet Tiger Electronic video game. They pretty much made that, and they only take a couple of AA batteries, and you could probably get them for cheap. I'm not sure exactly how much they were rolling for back in the day as far as like a Tiger Electronic game, but there were so many of them that the parents didn't know, so they'd be like, oh yeah, he wants a Game Boy, and then they're like, oh, what's that? Oh, it's some handheld game. And then they'll see that at Walmart or like Walgreens or something, and it doesn't say Game Boy, but it's a handheld electronic video game. They're like, oh yeah, maybe I thought she was talking about this, and it's really not. But it's one of those things where you could take to your school, and people used to trade and say, oh, I'll trade you my Batman if you give me your Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. But also they would trade just to play them, because it's not a cartridge like it normally would be for a Game Boy. So, you'd have to have a completely different handheld game to play a different game. Going back to here, this was made by Tiger Electronics. Very, very basic. The Planeteers all come with their rings. You can see on his hand right here. He represents the Earth, because he's from Africa.
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet.
Then, of course, Captain Planet has a little lever on the back here, so that it would basically, I forget what this was actually for. So it has like some mechanism over here that would allow him to do some type of an action, but his hands are kind of like out this way, because he was normally flying around and doing a lot of things. So, oh, there we go. So basically the mechanism allows his hands to go to make some action. Kind of like what was a good example of this? The Toy Biz. So the Marvel Toy Biz always had some type of an action. And if you've seen some of the Toy Biz figures that I've done on Who's Lucy before, you remember the Wolverine that I've done, and he has like an action, like a little lever that you do to make him do like some sort of a action-packed move.
Then let our polluting powers combine! Super radiation!
And of course, Duke Nukem doesn't have that. It's just a basic, figure, and he does have articulation in his legs where both of these just go up and down. Him, you can kind of like move to the side as well as front and back. It's a really big figure. His hands at the wrist do not articulate, they just go up and down. So they're very basic. This one's actually been, it's good condition, but you can tell that it's got some wear and tears, around. For the price that I paid for these figures, it's a steal. I can't, go into detail anymore as far as like how great. That's one of the things I keep saying all the time, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, okay? If you go to Mecca Market's live videos on whatnot, he has the best deals anywhere you can find on any loose figures, and even on the carded figures, and he's got all kinds of new stuff all the time. and he's got all different kinds, like, WWE. He's got Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He's got a ton of those. He got a Masters of the Universe. He's got some Turtles. I've gotten a lot of Turtle stuff from him, and he's got some really good gems. Go check him out. He's had some really good figures in the past couple weeks that he's been doing his live stream again, because he recently moved to a new house. He's got a bigger space, so his toy store that he basically runs out of his house has gotten a lot bigger. So, but yeah, I mean, essentially, I'm gonna have these on my miscellaneous shelf. Hopefully, I'll be able to get more of the other ones like Gaia, Wheeler, Mati, and Guy. Those are the rest of the Planeteers, and I think I'm missing someone. I forget the name of the one from Russia. She's the girl that is always messing around with Wheeler, or Wheeler's always trying to get her to go out with him and whatnot. But looking out for those. But yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of like, I learn it something every day when I look at some of these toys that I end up getting. Like, I didn't know that Coleco made action figures. I didn't know that Tiger made action figures, which was really, I know of the big ones like Remco, Playmates, Hasbro, Kenner, Toy Biz. What else am I missing? Those are the ones that I knew that made toys. And there were some other ones too, but I know Hasbro, Mattel, Playmates, and Remco was more in the 80s. They kind of went out of business after a while, but they did like the A-Team, they did the AWA Superstars, but like Hasbro, Playmates, Mattel, and Toy Biz and Kenner, those were the big ones in the 80s and in the 90s. But I'm very glad that I have these figures to add to my collection. Like I said, they're going into my miscellaneous shelf. So be sure to definitely like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you like what you see, I'm going to have some more YouTube channel videos for the Who's Lucy section. I have all of my playlists separated, and of course some unboxings, Twitch stream replays. And so I've added some more stuff that we've been doing, but definitely give them a shout. Be sure to like and subscribe, and then hit that notification bell so you're alerted anytime that I have new content for Jaden and I to come bring to you. Thank you so very much, guys, and be safe. Keep on cruising.